Power Business, proudly brought to you by MTN. Today, we make moves, including this next conversation now. The arts are often seen as a nice to have, but what if they're actually a smart investment, fueling jobs, innovation, and social change? Well, for this conversation, we're joined by Dr. Mdluli, Standard Bank Curator and Gallery Manager at the Standard Bank Art Lab. Dr. Same, a very good evening and good to have you with us on Power Business.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
So when we speak about investment then in the arts, what does that mean in practical terms, and why is it important then in an economic sense?
Yeah, I think in a corporate sense, or at least in the Standard Bank scenario, it not only resembles like over 40 years of championing the arts and the various kind of entities that they've sponsored, which is the National Arts Festival, Joy of Jazz, but it's also, I think, the owned assets that they have in the arts. And by that, I mean a gallery, which was built in 1990 specifically for housing art and exhibiting art. And also two major art collections, those being the Standard Bank Corporate Art Collection and the Standard Bank African Art Collection, which is jointly owned with the university. And those three things as owned assets, I think, speak to how it's more than just something you sponsor and then you kind of don't have any more commitment to, but that it is things that you have to now, look after, develop, and grow in a sense. And those, I think, speak to what investment in the arts really looks like.
Mm-hmm. So looking then at the sector, how does the arts sector contribute to the broader economy, whether through job creation, tourism, skills development, or even innovation?
Yeah. I think this aspect is often taken for granted, and both by the arts sector itself, but also by other professional bodies that would come in and partner with the arts sector to contribute to the, broader growth, economic growth, whether it's just, general economic growth of the nation or the society, but also the creative economy itself. And an example is transport and logistics, like, specialized transportation of artworks and antiques. And that's something that, we could, the arts could collaborate with in logistics and transportation and really build skills around that, because it is a gap. Another is in legal terms of intellectual property or setting up artist estates. And these are just, I think, examples that I'm pointing out that, again, in growing the sector, it is also about broadly about this economy as well, the creative economy.
And to that point of thinking broadly then, of this economy, of the sector, Dr. Same, what are some of the misconceptions about the value of the creative industry? As I alluded to earlier, there's often sort of a perception that the arts are nice to have rather than a strategic economic sector.
Sure. I think it's partly because it's historically it's seen as not a serious career or that it's not profitable. All of which I think are valid, of course. But in some ways, I think there's a need to make way for critical skills as well. And that's important because perhaps, those are more urgent, right? And that's not to say that the arts are not important or a critical part of society, but that sometimes I think they're seen as a nice to have because there are other priorities that have to be taken care of. The kind of socioeconomic, conditions general South Africans are living under. So it's about creating a balance of understanding as well that a big part of people kind of valuing who they are and having a sense of pride, a sense of a meaningful, I think, pride in who they are is going to be driven by, growing the cultural sector, as well as, all the other kind of critical skills that are required to build a nation.
Certainly, and making the arts more accessible and relatable to diverse audience, that is often discussed. How does this kind of inclusivity then strengthen the sector and create new opportunities for growth?
I think not only does it foster social cohesion, and I know that sometimes it's a cliche that's thrown around, but it really is a space, I think, where it can be a catalyst for solving societal problems, like unemployment, as I mentioned earlier, with the kinds of careers that could be developed and, looked into in terms of creating training for young people. And growth, I think the growth aspect is alluded to, as I alluded to earlier, it's quite, you have to kind of create meaningful partnerships that create solutions, but start to shape, I think, as well, a positive outlook for future generations. And so I think for the art labs, we are hoping to add to enhancing this kind of, by being in a retail space like Nelson Mandela Square, in making this art accessible, but also making it relatable, that it shouldn't be an intimidating space, and therefore, much more inclusive.
Yeah. And talk to us about the role then education and community-based programs they can play then in developing new audiences and future talent for the creative industry.
I think those are quite critical. And critical because I think they create a space for shared knowledge and this thing of transfer of skills and ideas and methodologies. Art itself, I think, is a conduit of sharing ideas and creating thinking that collectively could create conducive spaces for empowerment and development for young people. And so I think for the art lab, it's also about becoming this kind of catalyst where these programs around community-based ideas and preoccupations, right? I think we're perfectly located as well, but being in the square there with the library and the theater, and that we could really build this kind of interesting space where these this element of educational or an educational space could really come alive.
Now, Dr. Same, I want to know from you, what would you say then to corporates or government bodies who still see the arts then as a low priority investment?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really speak for government, but I think what I can say is that it does require collective effort. Growing the arts does require, it can't just be left up to the private sector. It is because it is something I think that serves society holistically and is accessible to everyone, right? So what I would like to emphasize, I think, is that it will take a collective effort to grow the creative economy.
And to that point, Dr. Same, corporate sponsorships and partnerships, they often fill then that critical funding gap. What motivates businesses to support the arts, and how can those partnerships be better structured for impact?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at the core of it really is those, it's a good corporate citizenship, but also it's about, I think, creating a healthy environment where different sectors can thrive or have at least equal opportunities, so to speak, and in that way, I think they become a very important kind of entity in also becoming part of the cultural fabric of the locales where they operate. So they're not just kind of, serving as this, these entities that abstract things, but actually giving back as well. So it really is an important part, I think, of finding a way to not only, have a more human side of, I think, what is sometimes seen as a purely transactional kind of interaction, but that rather, part of also sponsoring the art is good corporate governance and citizenship.
And I want to turn to this question of innovation and creativity then in the arts sector. And we spoke, or you alluded to it briefly, in the opening question. But Dr. Same, the creative economy, that's been identified, as a driver of innovation. How do the arts then feed into other sectors like tech, design, or even business thinking?
I mean, I think they're like foundational, so to speak. Any level of design or science does, require a level of creativity. I always argue with people that say they are left brain side or right brain side, because either way, I think there's a level of kind of critical thinking, yes, on the creative side that you require, but also equally on the science side, there's a level of creativity that scientists have to apply to their thinking, and whether they're coming up with a new innovative idea or invention, it does require a level of creativity, and if that's not fostered from an early age, we rob a future generation of really being imaginative about the kinds of things and solutions they can come up with.
Yeah, that's definitely an important point that you point out there, Dr. Same. Creativity, what the role it plays in, in the sciences, in other sectors, like tech design. We definitely need to foster that sort of creativity when we think about the broader problems, when we think about problem solving. But looking ahead, what would a well-supported, economically sustainable art sector look like, and what are the most urgent steps needed to get there?
I think, having a sense of strong policies, I suppose, that support artists and protect artists in a sense of the creative economy. I mentioned earlier, collaboration and partnership with legal, for example, to just enabling artists to set up estates, for example, intellectual property. All of those things, I think, are still require a little bit of effort and intentionality. And then funding, I think, is a big part, which is where I think entities like Standard Bank that have been supporting and funding the arts in a real way, in a tangible way for over 40 years, are required for more to join.
All right. Dr. Same, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us for that conversation.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Same there. Dr. Same Mdluli, Standard Bank Curator and Gallery Manager at the Standard Bank Art Lab, taking us through that conversation.